Sup everybody, this is Karak with ACG, and as always, it's my continuing mission to bring you reviews that aren't 2 minutes long or filled with sponsored bullcrap. If you're a point-and-click adventure fan, you know the dopamine high of getting into a new game and understanding the unique rules and combinations of items, exploration, or unearthing strange patterns in the way the developers think and expect you, in turn, to react. And I'm sure we all remember that one weird combination in a game we played.
First day as a boss fern.
An open bottom girdle.
A couple half gallons of milk.
Now, throwing stars or ninja stars or
urine and blood.
And somehow it combined to make a poetic talking dishwashing robot. It's hard not to feel that point-and-click games are in some ways this direct link between the gamer and the game maker, as the mix of puzzle solving and usually binary ways in which actions must be taken are a direct reflection of the maker, with very little in between them and yourself. And one of my favorites was Stasis, and now the team behind that, Brotherhood, are creating Beautiful Desolation. This is a post-apocalyptic point-and-click game set in Africa after all hell breaks loose. It's out on the 26th for $19.99 on Steam. Let's see how it did, shall we? As always, if you like the video, maybe subscribe. Or maybe go out there and find somebody you like and watch and subscribe to them. Do like I did. I just recently subscribed to Nakey Jakey, who makes hilarious stuff, even though in his last video about dating shows, he forgot to mention that the best dating show ever is To Catch a Predator. Not sure how you missed that one. But anyway, I digress. Here's my review. Graphics will be up first. For a game set mostly in post-apocalyptic Africa, it's fitting that the game holds true to the traditions of those that came before it, like Stasis itself, detailed smaller locations all in a 2D format that have all manner of oddities to them that make them feel just a bit more alive and dynamic than some other titles of this type. Smoke flits around your feet of your character as you trudge through a deserted field, chicken run around a location as you walk up ramps, mysterious pollen from plants you probably best leave alone filters through the air around you, and all manner of bugs can be swirling around your head, and that's only in 1 or 2 places. If the game is anything, it's downright focused on making each location have some kind of unique atmosphere to lodge it deep into your cranium for later recollection. The way the game is set up, there are also many smaller locations as well as the overland map for the general parts you can travel to, and that mixes them all together. And I really dug that setup. No one place is massive. It's not about the sprawling openness of a Baldur's Gate or a Pillars of Eternity. Instead, it's more about moving you through liquid encounters and story moments and changing things up as you continue. To me, it's budget, but budget spent right. Now, speaking of spent right, each place is weirdly interesting as well. They're never really huge or overly detailed, but there's something about them that I really dig, that mix of past and present past, all coming together when it comes to the graphical presentation. Like a robot who speaks with a heavy Jamaican accent fixes a futuristic car inside of a village. With the different mixture of visuals and ideas in the game world, everything is surprising. But that's what's cool to me. The entire place is strained through the events of the past, most of which you actually know of, to present you into the future. And it's interesting to see what traditions, thought processes, and even locations live through the apocalyptic events at the starting of the story and meet you here later in it. Now let's talk about the character designs for a second. Tribal punk is what the devs call the design, and I would say I have to pretty much agree. Though while the main characters, they're fairly normal. They're rugged dudes of a general sort. They're the kind of guys you'd meet watching a soccer game or dropping the term wanker when your dog runs into them on the beach. Everyone else, though, they're weird. Simply none of the characters you meet in the game are normal. Many of them are encased in creepy masks, for instance. What at first appears to be a cost-saving measure starts to sort of boil out into the sweeping narrative and mythology that I won't spoil, but turned out to be pretty cool. From robots with human psyches trapped in them, begging to get out and crying in the darkness, to mystical women carrying over possibly magic gardens. You never really know what you're going to meet or who. Now, that being said, I was not a huge fan of the animations for the NPCs talking. They just shake their head constantly as they yak, and it looks like you walked into a raver club and everyone's bouncing to a beat you can't hear. It would have helped to have had some variation in that movement here, even in the smallest amount, instead of a shaky loop like the Steadicam just got turned off. Now, speaking of cameras, one thing to remember is this is effectively 2D environments, so you can't rotate the camera, so be aware that. You're always looking down at it in a very particular way. You can zoom in and out. I will tell you that when it comes to the graphics, if I were you, I would look into the anti-aliasing solution first and see if you can possibly turn that down from ultra high. Ultra high appears to use some kind of possibly TXAA or something like that. There is a blur introduced that really isn't incredibly impressive here, and because these aren't at times super high resolution assets that we see on the screen, or at least super detailed textures, that can be a little bit noticeable. Let's talk about performance for a bit. Now, the game will run on pretty much damn near anything. It doesn't require a lot of power, and aside from a couple locations with heavy use of alpha transparencies and one or two places where a large number of particle systems are throwing shit at your head like a Mexican fireworks stand just exploded, the game actually gets well over 100 FPS on a 1080 and a last or current gen i5. Turning up the resolution does drop that a bit, but strangely and happily enough, Beautiful Desolation does include a number of settings for graphics. As a package, I like the look of the game and I loved some of the environments. And sure, it's not incredibly highly detailed at some places, and you can see where there is a budget going on here. It's a 1999 game. Still, there was a lot of places that were very unique, and I liked a lot of the art style. That brings us to sound, music, and voice.
My name is Mark Leslie. This is my brother Don and our companion Booch. Can you help us?
Mark Leslie. Don, brother.
You think they have castle here?
And I'm going to cover sound first today because, first, the game uses a large amount of sound samples and envelopes, and really smart sound work here informs you of the locations themselves. It changes up the main character's footsteps from the patter of his heels on wood to the smooshing wet sound of him slogging through wet sand. It's very well done and includes the other party members as you get going in their locations. So while they might be running on sand, you might be on wood, and you can hear that difference. It's little details like that which help the game. Also, there's a very smart usage of incidentals here, like a fly zipping around in the air, or the way each location has just a bit of air sound to mimic that light hum you hear in open spaces when wind comes off buildings. Lastly, they do something few developers do right, and if I could give them a high five, I would. When in conversations, the location's sounds play lightly in the background, solidifying that momentary now with the past sounds you heard as you walked up to talk to somebody, and the future that you're going to hear when you leave the conversation. That grounds all the audio, and it helps much of it to feel like the conversations in these formats, which is boxed away from the rest of the presentation itself, feel like a part of the collective whole and not separate to themselves. Lastly, and this is something I don't get why others do not do, the game has a huge number of adjustable audio settings in the game. Why many games only have one or two astound me, and here you're offered a huge number of settings to dial in the audio the way you want. Very well done. That brings us to music. Mick Gordon, so there you go, of Doom and other huge game fame, he brings his considerable talent into the music of Beautiful Desolation with a mixture of native instruments from the game's considerable natural locations and selections, as well as a couple things that you probably wouldn't expect. What's fascinating here is the judicious hand that they use for employing it. Many locations have very little music and see you trudging through the game world. The only real notes of music played out are those of your feet on the tablature of the game world. Then other places mix moody, somber, and altogether almost alien music climbs up to the forefront. And that isn't to say that it's all gloomy ambiance and discordant chants. Natural elements and musical instruments that fit more particular characters play out in their locations. You sort of sit up and think, okay, this is important, even if you're just talking to a strange skeleton with an uncomfortable attraction towards your skin at the time. And speaking of weird conversations, let's talk about voice. Here we do run into some issues. First, and the main one, while the developers have gone out of their way to offer a creepy techno ambiance and alien vibe to many of the voices, a lot of times they just don't sound that good. Almost like the samples themselves are compressed, so much so that I actually went into the file folders to see if I could find those samples and see if there was an issue with the compression itself. It appears, though, to just be a style they chose. Some characters come off sounding awesome, like the matriarch who wants you to be a breeder and is pretty none too subtle about it. But others have some artifacts and chirping elements to them that always made it a little bit unpleasant to listen to. Luckily, the main characters don't have these issues. Now, if this was done completely on purpose and to give you a discordant feel to everything and slight anxiety, that actually did work. And I have no real issues with that. But for me personally, I couldn't really tell if that was the plan. When it comes to the actual main characters and their voice, it's fine. Mark and Don are both played out passably well and better than some of the voice work that we got in other games. It's still not the strong suit here, though, but it's not as glaring. Once again, just a little weird and a little offset with some of the NPCs. And that brings us to gameplay and a bit about the story. And this one starts out with a bang, literally, as you're driving down the road. Discussion about bad family times with your loved one, then just boom, the crap hits the fan and a giant space alien gang sign appears in the air. You do what most people do and basically crash the shit out of your car. Waking up sometime later, you're introduced to the fact that a lot of things have changed since when you crashed. At this time, you're reintroduced in short fashion to your brother Don, and you and Don attempt one of the worst laid plans in human history to investigate the giant alien thingy. And I mean it, the plan is easily the worst plan I've ever seen. It's the equivalent of yelling, "Look, your shoe's untied," and running off and hoping it works. Strangely enough, though, it actually sort of does work, and you're introduced to a couple of the game's mechanics during that mission before the crap hits the fan one more time, and this one's sort of a doozy. Mark and Dawn find themselves somewhere and sometime in the future, in a world that's both ultimately familiar and a bit alien. The rest of the game plays out like many point-and-click games, where you play as Mark running around the game world, collecting items, solving a couple puzzles, and piecing together the crazy-ass story that revolves around you and this mysterious alien artifact. The moment I mention puzzles and point-and-click, I'm sure some of you are thinking of the very worst offenders in this genre. Luckily, there are very few in this game that will stump you for long. But what can stump you, and is also a huge positive to the game, so it's sort of a tit for tat here, is that some of the puzzles or items needed have a few ways of getting them, which can cause a bit of confusion when you talk to someone and you have an item already that the game is sort of sending you out to get. So you have to basically leave the location and come back. What I want is a real-time inventory check for the kinds of games like this, so it can be like, "Yo, dog, you needed that extra large testicular girdle, right? Well, I got that, so let's add some candy corn to it, and voila, we got the child collector." But instead, you gotta leave and then come back, and then it's like, "Oh, yeah, I had that with me the entire time." And you have to add that to the fact that there's no real quest tracker here, meaning that aside from the notebook, you have some random sketches and puzzle helping notes, you can find yourself a bit lost as to what you need to do. Now, you can reread conversations you have had, but it's not always exactly clear what you need to do a couple times out of the game, where you need to go or who you need to talk to. Add to that, the world is actually pretty large and spread into various sectors of the world itself, with each having their own locations and sometimes sub-locations that open for you to visit. Lastly, the game does have some items that are around the game world, and sometimes you have to get mighty close to them to have it indicate where you are and that you've actually got it. And if you know an item's in a location, it can have you running back and forth, scouring locations like a friggin' World War II minesweeper, trying to discover an item that you know is in a particular part of a level. Once you finally get it, it's fine, and a lot of times a little visual marker pops up, but I noticed a couple where it did not happen. A testament to this game, though, is as I continued to play it and continued to explore this world, there was an issue that popped up in the presentation, and that's that I actually wish there was more narrative. I've never wished for a book in a game world. Hell, every time I pick up a goddamn book in Skyrim, I try to throw it away as quickly as possible. But there's a ton of story here and speaking parts, and you can hover your mouse over various parts of the game world to get location and item data, which does add to the fiction, but I still wish there was more. This is a fascinating world, one where the questions start to rise up about the inhabitants, their traditions, the stories. But if it's not directly connected to the situation at hand, you probably won't find out much about it. It's more of a missed opportunity and probably budgetary than a mistaken decision, but I figured it should be noted. And that brings us to fun factor. Kickstarter, man. It's either the birthing ground of original content fresh from the minds of those with brains deeper than their wallets who need just a bit of a helping hand to get their hidden ideas created, or it's a great source from which shit springs eternal like a fountain at the end of a Calcutta sewer line. Luckily, Beautiful Desolation is much more of that first part, because it's something unique as a game world. Post-apocalyptic Africa, it's usually only visited in books or comics and rarely really in games. So to see it and see this strange tribal cyberpunk world with its alternating mythologies play out was really interesting to me and something that kept me coming back and sort of looking around the game world. I just wish, once again, there was a bit more narrative. It doesn't have the almost tensile strength grip on its atmosphere that I would say Stasis did. I rarely leave a game wanting to know more about the world, though, and with Beautiful Desolation, I absolutely did. Additionally, I didn't really have any problems with any of the puzzles, but I did get lost a couple times in exactly where I was supposed to go or what I was supposed to do. I do think that a little bit more of a budget and a little bit more people working on this, they could have fleshed it out to something even greater, but for $19.99, that's what you get. Now, as you guys know, I rate games on a buy, wait for sale, rent, or never touch it again rating system, with rent being replaced by deep sale on PC, if that's the score I give it. Man, I think $19.99, if you're a point-and-click fan and you like different stuff, this is for you. I think a lot of people may not like this as much as Stasis. Some people haven't played Stasis, might like this a lot. Some people might like this more than Stasis. It really just depends on what you're looking for. I would have liked a bit more narrative, and I certainly would have liked some more clarity on a couple of the times when I was lost. But what this is this is a game to me that really is right at its perfect budget. This is a great price, and it's something that when we see from Kickstarter, it got kickstarted, boom, it got made, boom, it's out, and we get a full-fledged product, and that is quite rare. And it's also quite a big product. It also has a lot of voiceovers, and I was strangely impressed by some of the cutscenes. We see a lot of games at this price skimp on that, and they just have a static cutscene. Here, there's many where you're dropping down into cities or near ruins or near graveyards. It's just not something I expected and makes it feel like a more full-fledged product. So that's it for me. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you dislike the video, give it a thumbs down. Check out Reddit and Facebook and Twitter and all those places. Spread this video wherever you can and wherever good video game discussion is had. And you can become a patron on the Patreon website. Hey, if I've ever found you a game that you really liked or warned you away from a bad one, you might want to jump in there, throw $5-10 in there. You can join a great Discord. You can have a great time with us, play different games. We have servers for D&D, private servers for games. We do all kinds of crazy shit in there. And it helps me continue to give you guys reviews that aren't 2 minutes long or filled with sponsored bullcrap. Peace out and enjoy the rest of your week.